Okay, welcome everybody. Hopefully you can see me and my screen. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Reduce Food Waste and Composting Workshop. This is a community effort to address facts and solutions to food waste. We'll start the workshop in just a few moments, but there are a few things I wanted to go over before we started. First off, this presentation is being recorded on the Nevada Conservation League's Facebook page. Only those who are unmuted will show on camera. So if you prefer not to be recorded, just click on the video icon on your screen and click no video. If you are a Spanish speaker, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and click Spanish to hear this presentation interpreted in Spanish. The Spanish recording will also be uploaded on the Chispa, Nevada Facebook page following this event. Sometimes there's glitches with the interpretation, so you can also click on the English interpretation just to make sure you hear my voice in English very clearly. The event will end with audience questions. So if you have any specific questions at a certain point during the presentation, just type them out on the chat. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live, you could do the same. And we'll end this off with food waste bingo, a fun takeaway of this event. And lastly, if you prefer subtitles to this event, please click on the closed captioning button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and this will be auto captioned for you. All right, so here's today's agenda. We'll start off with introductions from all of our community leaders. Then we'll jump right into the root of the problem, which is food waste. We'll go over some facts and current policies, then dive into ways that you can reduce your food waste. Next, we'll talk about the 3 basic types of compost bins, how to make them and how to get started. And the presentation will end on the environmental action you can get involved in to help with environmental issues. Then we'll open it up to questions and end on some food waste bingo. All right, so I'm going to introduce all of my co-hosts. I'll start with myself. My name is Torie Soriano. I'm with Climate Action Nevada, which is an organization that works with the Nevada Conservation League and is part of the League of Conservation Voters. I'm also an avid composter. I started 3 years ago and love it so much. I'm going to introduce all of the rest of my co-hosts just to speed things up. They can go ahead and wave. First, I have Richa and Mhansi. They are the co-chairs of the 5R Revolution, which is part of the Southern Nevada group of the Sierra Club. Great composters of mine. Then I have Andie Davis. She is the UNLV garden coordinator. She's also part of the garden club, which is the UNLV Rebel Roots there as well. And then last but not least, I have Aria. She is the director of the digital outreach for Chispa, Nevada. All right, so I'm going to have Richa go over the next section, which is on food waste and policies, which is the root of the problem. And I'll have her start off by asking you guys a poll question, which you can answer on your screen, which is, how much food waste does America produce yearly? So you can go ahead and, looks like there's technical issues, of course. Looks like we have the answer anyway. So Richa, you can go ahead with your part of the presentation.
Sorry about that, Torie. When we think about pollution, many times we think about oil spills, discarded trash, landfills, plastic pollution, but there's another type of pollution that's just as prevalent and just as important to address, and that is food waste. 40 million tons of food is wasted in the US alone, and 25% of that ends up in our municipal solid waste. Next slide. So just to conceptualize how large of an area that is, all that food generates greenhouse gases. And if we were to capture all that, food waste in itself would be a third country. So you can see here, China is the first biggest country, and the US as a second as polluters that emit greenhouse gases, and food waste would be number 3. Next slide, Torie. And many times food perfectly good and could be eaten is thrown away. And if you were to just take that into consideration, all that uneaten food would be the size of China. And then food takes a lot of resources to grow. For example, the gas it takes to transport food, the gas it takes to run the machinery, the electricity that it takes to run the factories that produce it. So all that is gone to waste when there is food waste, including water. So 25% of available fresh water is used to grow food that's never eaten. And with the amount of food that goes directly into our landfills could actually be fed to people who are in need. And you can see here that the world's hunger problem could be solved just by the quarter, 1/4 of all the food that's wasted in US, UK, and Europe. So these visuals are there for you to understand that the magnitude of food waste is pretty large and at the same scale as plastic pollution, air pollution, and any other kind of pollution you're seeing out there. And food waste is generated from many different sources and even very close to us, including in our own homes. So a lot of our presentation today is going to be focused on what we can do at home, but we also need to be aware that a lot of food waste happens in grocery stores and restaurants and manufacturing sector and farms. Many times there are laws that I will go over that try to tackle those issues and try to reduce food waste. It can be very difficult and challenging. All right, so why is there food waste in our homes? There are so many different reasons. You can read them on the screen, but the most common reason why food is being wasted is because we go off of the expiration date. So if you see a can of lentils that expired maybe 6 months ago, we think it's bad and throw it away. Or we are buying too much of it. How many of us have one of those days where we just want to go in the grocery store and load it up? And then we come home and realize we can't eat all this food. And then we keep it around till it goes expired and we just throw it out. So a lot of this reasons, just thinking about your own home, think about how much food you're wasting. And sometimes you're throwing it out a little bit per week, but every week that adds up. So another reason food is being wasted a lot in the US in our homes is food is cheaper than other countries. So many times we can buy a lot of food and not really add up the dollars it costs to buy it and then throw it away. So another reason is underutilized leftovers. So we are very much a society of to-go, and when we take it home, we may not want to eat it the next day, so we throw it out. And also composting is not big part of our culture in most cities. I know some cities are trying to implement laws, and many cities naturally are more progressive and green. Seattle and LA are really good examples of that. So they will have more composting programs, but in Las Vegas, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to compost on a large scale. So homes and individuals are left to their own solutions. And fortunately, Torie and Andie, they have a lot of knowledge that they're here to share with you. All right, next slide. So food waste is in our restaurants. So I'm not going to read the whole slide here, but one of them that sticks out to me is the extensive menu options. So you're having a restaurant that offers so many different types of food, but you don't know which one of those are selling at the most, selling the best, and some of them are not selling at all. So all that food that was kept for that meal is being thrown out if it's not being used. I will also say there are oversized food portions. So we order something, we can't finish it. That food that's left on your plate ends up in the garbage. So not only are we looking at food waste from the restaurants in the sense that they can't use that food up and it expires and goes to waste, but it also is the amount of food you order and you can't finish and it ends up in the waste. Another interesting one that I found is that buffets. I mean, before the pandemic, Las Vegas is a buffet town. And I never really gave thought to the fact that you have to have hot food cooking through the end of the hour. So what happens 1 minute before and you have all this food left over that you were anticipating customers to come in and get it, and now it ends up in the trash. Next slide. And then there's food waste in farming. Farming, you would think that that's a source of our food. How can food be wasted in our source of our food? But there's a lot of food waste that happens in farming. For example, the one thing that caught my eye here is damage by weather, pests, and disease. And farmers can try to control it as much as they can, but a lot of the weather patterns are changing in our world. So what happens when a farmer doesn't know what's coming next? All that harvest that they had either ends up not being eaten, not growing, or catching some kind of disease and dying. So there's food waste in our farming. Another example is they may be expecting a certain crop to sell much more than it actually did. So if it doesn't sell, all that food that is not sold also ends up in our trash. Next slide. So I hope this gives you some amount of an idea that it's a big problem and there are a lot of reasons why food is being wasted. And additionally to all that is that food takes a lot of resources to grow. Like I said in the beginning, it takes gas, electricity, fresh water. It also takes human labor. And when you think about all that goes into just one apple and that one apple is thrown away, you think about a box of donuts and that gets thrown away. Think about all the cost that goes into generating that food and it ends up in our trash. You can also see here that there's hunger and food insecurity still exists in not just in the US, but around the world. So why is that food that could be perfectly given away and perfectly being used by someone else being thrown away? And then food ends up in our landfill, which doesn't get properly composted. Just like many things that end up in the landfill, it doesn't decompose or degrade, and it generates methane pollution. So food waste is a huge problem. Next slide. Of course, there are a lot of laws and regulations that are set up to help with this. However, each one of them has a very big barrier and downfall to it. So the EPA and the USDA, they have a food recovery hierarchy and a food waste challenge. So the food hierarchy is, I'm just looking at the time here, food recovery hierarchy just is government's way of saying this is how we will tackle food waste. So number one is helping businesses reduce food waste at their source. If it's not being used, where else can that food go to? So that's how it's a pyramid that Torie has nicely laid out in our PowerPoint slide here. So starting with food source reduction, feed hungry people, feed animals, industrial uses, composting, and landfill. Notice that landfill is a last option for food waste. And then the government has also implemented implemented a food waste challenge. In the next slide, we'll see the number of corporations that have signed up. And the goal is 50% food waste reduction by 2030. However, this all sounds great, but there are a lot of issues that have happened in this regulations. So number one being that similar laws and regulations have been in place. So many times corporations are wondering why are these new rules being put in place? And these regulations are not scalable. Many times they're very complex and expensive to implement and ambiguous. So corporations are left with trying to apply it in their business. Not only that, these two rules are not really tackling the other sources of food waste. As we saw, food waste can happen at the consumer level in our homes. It can happen in the supply chain management, such as the manufacturing, but this only targets businesses. So you're again shifting the burden from one source to another, and in this one, it's businesses. The second rule that we have, or second law, is a Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act and Federal Food Donation Act, which really is trying to giving businesses an opportunity without liability to divert food. So currently you'll hear a lot of restaurants, you will wonder, why do just perfectly good food items end up in their trash? And if you talk to people at the store, they will say, most likely we're worried that it will make someone else sick. There's a lot of health code violations. That's what I hear every time. Well, this rule was supposed to give a little bit of more, take away the liability that businesses would face in the act if they were to give this food away. Well, in reality, they have found that businesses actually are still very much concerned about the liability they would incur. So they don't really donate the food. They also find that, yes, there's a rule, there's a law, but the government doesn't give money or funding to the businesses to help them transport that food. So it's not as simple as packing that food and giving it away. You have to think about transportation, refrigeration. You have to think about the collection aspect of it. All that costs money to a business, and the government is not funding any of that. So another reason why these rules are there, but it hasn't solved the problem. The Internal Revenue Code, which my background is in tax, so I am surprised to see this on here because not many corporations that I've worked on have used this. But what this rule says in the PATH Act, both of them are tax code related. If a business was to donate food, they can deduct that amount on their tax return. Well, just like you can see with the EPA and USDA, these rules and tax law can be very cumbersome, and compliance in itself is very expensive. So basically, to get any benefit from this tax code regulation on my tax return, I will have to put a large amount of investment into just complying with this tax law. So another reason why this is not very effective rule. And then we have the Uniform Open Dating Regulation, which really says we have, by the way, right now, which something I learned in this research, is that many of the food industries they don't have to abide by any food label regulations. So one company can put expired by date, another can put best by date, but those dates are calculated based on the company's calculation. So there's nothing uniform about what we are reading on the can. Well, this rule was there to start establishing a standard so we can know that every single food item, we will have the same expiration date. It will abide by the same rules. Well, this has also not been very effective because if you have to, every industry is different, number one, and every industry to comply with this rule has to change a major portion of their manufacturing and business operations, and with little to no funding from the government. So these are many rules that, again, we realize that food waste is a problem and government should do a bigger part in all this. And there are some new rules coming out, but the focus of this presentation is really we as individuals can take a lot of this on ourselves and reduce at least what we're doing at home and change some of our buying patterns. So next slide, and then I'll pass it over to Mhansi. Torie, okay. Oh, well, there was another slide to show you the corporations that were part of the food waste challenge, but you can simply Google that as well. So anyway, as I was saying, the focus of the rest of the presentation is on composting, which is in our control, and we can do something about that. So Mhansi, take it away.
So here are ways on how to reduce food waste, some ways that you can practice. Look for stores that have sustainable food reduction policies. If you don't see it on their website, if you don't know, ask a worker there, a manager specifically, to see if they have any policies in place. There's also farmers markets you can go to. They're very good about having food that's not only in small quantities, but they can also use that food, excess food. Another tip is to eat a snack before going grocery shopping, or eat a full meal before going grocery shopping. Sometimes when we're hungry, we tend to buy more than we expected, and that can lead to some food waste. Another tip is to plan your shopping trips. Look in your fridge or cupboard, make a list of what you need and see what you already have. It can also help looking or taking a picture of your fridge or cupboard to see when you're at the store, and you can refer to those pictures. This way you're not buying something that you already have. One of the other things that I can suggest is buying more non-perishable items versus perishable items. For example, buying non-perishable items in bulk, such as oats, is a better option than buying apples in bulk, because apples will get rotten within a week or 2 weeks, but oats have a longer shelf life. So you can use that to make different meals, or you don't have to worry or stress about it going bad because it has a longer shelf life. Another thing that we can learn is how to properly store food. You can Google it. You can ask your mom or your dad or your friends. They always have different ways for food to last a longer time. Improper storage can lead to spoilage. One tip I learned while researching is keeping highly ethanol producing foods away from non-ethanol or low ethanol producing foods, such as keeping your banana away from your apple. The ethanol gas that it produces helps the banana ripen, but that gas can also help other fruits around it ripen at a faster pace. So that can lead to food waste, because you can eat the banana and then you don't eat the apple and it's just sitting on your counter, and then when you eat it, it can taste pretty bad. There are certain portions of produce that we tend to throw away and not think about consuming or repurposing. A common one that I can think of is lemon peels. We usually just, after juicing the lemon, we just throw away the peels. But the peels you can do so much with. You can put it as a face mask. You can add it to your cleaning supplies. You can use the zest to make different types of desserts. In grocery stores, when you walk in, you mostly see perfect produce that's displayed. The point is for it to be sold. But there is a lot of produce that you can also see that has blemishes. And when people usually go to the store, they observe the produce to see if it has any marks or anything. But actually, the ugly produce that has the blemishes will get thrown away because it's not being sold. So what is a good habit to put in place when you're also grocery shopping is to get the fruit or vegetable that has a little spot or blemish. At least you can consume it before it gets thrown away. You can cut around the blemish, or if you feel like there's a bad spot, you can just get rid of that part of the bad spot. The other part is still good to eat. Another method that restaurants typically use, but we can also use, is FIFO, first in, first out. I really like this process because it helps you know what is that needs to be used first. You can just look at something and you know that that needs to be eaten first before you can eat something that's in perfect condition, such as a red bell pepper. You can see it starting to wrinkle. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, maybe I should use that first. So you would use that first, and then you can use the more recent one later. Next slide. So what to do with the excess food before composting? There are many ways that you can still do good for that food. One of the ways is donating it to a food bank or any organization that focuses on food. For example, Ronald McDonald House is located on Sahara, and what you do is you just take the food there, and they accept the food, and they use that food to make meals for families that are living in that house. Another way that you can use the excess food is specifically the food scraps. I mentioned earlier the farmers market. A lot of the farmers, they accept food scraps. So you can gather your food scraps and give it to them. They typically feed their farm animals. You can also replant a specific food. For example, spring onions, you can get a jar, fill it up with water, put the spring onions in, and the spring onion will grow more spring onions, and you can use that over and over again. You can also, I mentioned this earlier too, but you can also repurpose a lot of foods. A common example is food scraps. You can combine those food scraps, add water, and make vegetable stock. If you have an excess amount of berries, a good way to utilize those is make them into smoothies or jams or jellies. And when you repurpose them, certain foods will have a longer shelf life. So you're extending that life. For example, jams. Now I will hand it over to Torie, where she will discuss the final option, which is composting.
Thank you, Mhansi. So there are times when there are food that will rot or that is inedible. So composting is a great final option to recycle the waste. So what is composting? Composting is a system that involves decomposers, which is microbials, bacteria, fungi, invertebrates, animals that feed on decaying materials. These things will ingest and break down material, transforming the waste into nutrients that could be used in your garden or farm. This chart shows the different types of composting bins. They're separated by their different methods. The first column is whether or not they are aerobic or not. Aerobic meaning it needs oxygen or added food and air. And anaerobic means a lack of oxygen. For the anaerobic bins, we're going to be teaching about how to do traditional outdoor composting, and then the indoor option, which is going to be a vermicomposting bin or a worm bin. For the anaerobic systems, we have a landfill, which is bad. We never want to throw things to have them break down in a landfill because they will never break down. So instead, we will talk about an indoor method called Bokashi. The next section will go over each of these three methods. Many of these composters you can buy for outrageous amounts of money, like $80 or more. Therefore, this workshop will feature a do-it-yourself, a DIY instructions on how to make one yourself. So the first composting method we have is a traditional outdoor composter. This is an outdoor system that breaks down with microorganisms and decomposers. This is a great option for those who have a yard, have large quantities of waste, and or are vegan or have a lot of vegan food waste. I'm going to show you guys a quick video on how to do traditional composting, and then I will open it up to Andie, who will talk about her experiences doing traditional composting. All right, so for a traditional composter, you can buy one. You can use a trash can or box if you have it, or even a large heap on your yard floor. First, start with your largest brown material, which is going to be your dry leaves and twigs to help with aeration at the bottom. Then you'll layer your green material, which is your food scraps, over your brown material, your dry material, until the bin is full, making sure to shred everything. Then make sure to keep it wet and like a wrung out sponge. And then you can cover it up with a cover material, trash can, lid, fabric if you have it. Make sure to turn the pile once a week to allow aeration, and then make sure that it's wet once again like a wrung out sponge. Cover it up when you're finished to help with evaporation, and you're good to go. Oop. All right, next slide. So it's pretty simple, very easy way to do it. So Andie, why don't you tell us your experiences?
So there are several different ways that you can do outdoor composting, like Torie showed the video beforehand. One of the methods that I wanted to mention that wasn't in the video was where the UNLV community garden is located. It is right next to the Rebel Recycling Center. And in that area, there is a giant industrial in-vessel composter that weighs, a couple tons, and it is able to churn and compost lots and lots of waste. The drawback for one of those machines, however, is you have to have a place for it, and you also have to, clean it out regularly, and I think that they break down quite often. So when I first got into outdoor composting, that was a method I was able to utilize being at UNLV and having communication with the director at the Rebel Recycling Center. But as this infographic points out, is that there are the major components of outdoor composters are that you need green matter, which is nitrogen rich, and you can think of it as your energy component, and then brown matter, which is carbon rich, or you can also think of as like a bulking matter. And also you have to think about airflow and moisture, and it's a delicate balance between all of these four things, because it can't be too dry, it can't be too wet, it can't be completely without air, and it obviously can't have too much air because then it has the potential to blow away. And of these different outdoor composting methods, kind of from the first slide that Torie showed on traditional composting, it was like a bin and receptacle. And you can think of that as like the stacking method of compost, in which, like stated previously, you have large amounts of waste that you can stack and fill up the entire one. However, there's another one, and if you've seen them before, or in the, I think it was on the left side of the video, those are called the dual batch composters, and they're the ones that spin. And the difference between just these two types of outdoor composters is that the dual batch composters, the ones that spin, they tend to be faster, but the con is they need to be turned daily and monitored, very frequently for moisture. And then that stacking method takes a lot longer to process and break down, but equally viable options. Thank you, Torie.
Thank you so much, Andie. She'll be back to tell us about vermicomposting. But the next one is vermicomposting. This is going to be the indoor option for composting. Technically, this is the feed animals on the EPA recovery hierarchy because it is a worm bin. You are literally taking care of worms. The worms will decompose/eat your waste. This is a great choice for those who do not have a yard or an apartment. It's very small, as you'll see in the video. People who fish, unfortunately, you can use this as bait. Those who have kids love worms, and it's a great science project for them. And those who are vegan or have vegan food waste, since this is what they'll primarily be eating. So once again, I'm going to have a 2-minute video on how I set up my worm bin, and then I will have Andie come back again to talk about her experience raising her new worm bin.
All right, go ahead.
All right, guys, let's start building our worm bin together. I have a used laundry bucket that I'm going to use as my bin with a lid. Got some coconut core I'm going to loosen up. Got some cardboard I'm going to shred. And I have my worms. They got delivered from vegasworms.com. Check out these beauties. All right, let's get started. The first thing we're gonna need is this lid's gonna have holes. All right, now we're gonna get all of our bedding prepped, and then we'll put the worms inside. All right, so I have my bedding prepared. This is actually a mixture of wettened coconut core, had some grounded up eggshells, some milk cartons, some cardboard, and I had bunny manure and hay left over. So I mixed it all up, made it nice and moist. And now it's time to add the worms. These worms do not like sunlight, so they're about to bury themselves in the bedding and get comfortable. I'll give them 1 day to get comfortable, and then I will start feeding them once a week. This is 500 worms, so they will eat about 1/4 pound of food a day. And so I will feed them that every single day with weekly portions. All right, it's time to put on the lid with the holes. These guys are home. And that is as easy as it gets for vermicomposting. Hope you guys learned a lot. I have my worm bin right here, the one I made in the video. So it's pretty simple as it gets. So Andie, why don't you tell us about your experience for making your bin not too long ago as well?
I was actually just about to type my response into the chat for a question. So I figure since it works into what I'm already saying, I'll go ahead and mention it. But as to the question, does the worm bin have a strong smell? Thinking about if I should keep it inside the garage or keep outside. The worm bin will only smell if you are doing it incorrectly. And Unfortunately, I have learned the hard way. One of the drawbacks of vermicomposting bins is that based on whatever container you're working with, you cannot add too much food to the worm bin, and it's just too much for the worms to eat and it'll rot. So in the past, I have had mold kind of break out because I feed them too much. But if you ever see mold in your bin, don't get worried too quick. Luckily, I found springtail isopods in my vermicomposting bin, so I at least have 2 organisms in there. But the springtails, they help keep mold populations down, and eventually the mold stabilized out within a week and there was no longer a smell. But as long as you're adding a small amount of food every single time you feed them and not overfeeding them, there shouldn't be a smell. And my mom wishes that I would keep it out in the garage, but unfortunately, the first time I did my vermicomposting bin, that due to the Vegas heat, my worms died during the summer, even inside the garage. So from now on, for the second worm bin that I started, I keep it inside my house, like stored deep in a closet, so she doesn't have to see them and get upset. But one thing that I wanted to say and reiterate was that, this is more of a small scale composting. So if you only have a few amount of scraps that you are not able to repurpose or, use in other modes of composting, you can't add a lot of the food scraps to this bin. And it also depends on how many worms you buy, and it also depends on how long you wait for the worm populations to grow. And as for all of my pets, these are probably the easiest pets that I have to care for. I think I'm not going to count each worm individually, but if I were to count the worms individually, I'd probably have at least, 300 organisms in my house. But yeah, they're super easy to take care of. On the one hand of things, I need to counteract my belief too. And even though they are easy to take care of, I wanted to make sure that I didn't neglect them and not take care of them. So like Torie said, as long as you're feeding them at least once a week and checking up on them every few days that for moisture and to make sure it's not too hot, that they should be pretty happy. And as for the other things that I learned with my worm bin is that, you don't need to just add shredded paper, kind of like Torie said, that as long as you're adding different mixes of dry organic matter that aren't the food scraps to build up the bedding that the worms live in, that, you should be able to grow your compost over time. And as I stated, how it's a slow process, it takes a long time to start to see the worm castings, which is the food that the worms digest that they poop out, and that's the compost. So it does take a while to, accumulate, but it is fun to have little worms in your house if you're into that thing.
All right, so that was vermicomposting or worm bin. The last method we're going to be talking about is called Bokashi, which is a Japanese technique that involves actually fermenting your food waste. This is a closed system that kind of pickles your food waste into an acidic system that will help with the help of microorganisms. This is a great option for those who do not have a yard or a apartment dweller, those who do not want to take care of worms, and those who are meat eaters, because many of the items that you cannot compost in the other 2 systems, like non-vegan waste, can be composted here. So this time, Andie made a video for us showing us how she set up her Bokashi compost bin. So we'll watch that now.
All
Alright, these are my 2 5-gallon buckets that I will be using for this Bokashi build. And I sourced these buckets for pretty cheap actually, I think $5 each off of OfferUp. And they were originally chlorine pool tab containers, and I really didn't like the look of them and how wordy they were, of course, with all the cautions. But so what I did is, of course, first I cleaned them out using a hose and soap and water, and then I spray painted the outsides, you know, so they weren't as distracting, and to put a personal touch on it, as well as how I spray painted the top pink, because I plan on putting this in my home because you can't really keep it outdoors in the sunlight, you know, or it will mess with the process. Alright, so just the difference between these 2 buckets is, one, this one has holes for drainage and this one does not. I opted not to apply a spigot for the Bokashi tea to dispense out of. So for this Bokashi build, how I would drain the Bokashi tea is, of course, take the bucket out and then pour the Bokashi tea into my garden using this way. Of course, if you wanted to install a spigot, it would be so much easier, but it is not necessary. And there's a couple things about this build that might be a little different than others, you know, because I DIY'd it and, you know, used the resources that I had. Of course, minus the spray paint, totally, you don't have to do this. Alright, so inside, I'll do this bin first. With this bucket just being the vessel with no holes, you kind of want to put a barrier, or you can put a barrier in between the holes and the bottom, you know, just so no food waste goes through the holes. And so what I did is I just had some spare, you know, cloth around, which I'm going to use to use as a strainer or a barrier at the bottom, like so. Alright, and then this process is super easy actually to set up. The most difficult part of this whole process, of course, was cleaning these bins out and making them ready for use, and as well as spray painting them. But to start off, put the bucket in. I have a entire thing of food scraps that I kept in my freezer, and the one great perk about this composting method is it allows you to compost a lot of food waste. And, you know, compared to other types of compost, such as the vermicomposting bin, which we'll talk about later, is you can't really load the vermicomposting bin too much, or else you'll get mold development and it's, you know, too much for the worms. So with this one, you know, you can stack it all the way up to the top with food scraps, as long as, you know, between each stack you sprinkle just a little bit of this Bokashi bran to help speed up the fermentation and, you know, make all those microbes happy. So I'm just gonna try first and dump it in like that. It's still pretty frozen. I didn't give it time to thaw out, which is, you know, it's fine to thaw out in here. Okay, and then opening up a brand new bag of Bokashi bran. Alright, and this entire bag could potentially last me the entire year, because you only need to sprinkle a little amount on top of your food scraps. So I'm just going to do like a big spoonful, bring it over, you know, dust it on top. Because right now my food scraps are pretty frozen into a big block, but as they thaw out and melt, then eventually they will spread out to the bottom. Alright, sealing that back up. And you remember previously how I said I totally DIY'd this. One thing that I forgot to mention is that you need something to put on top of your Bokashi bin inside. What I did is I just measured the circumference of the bottom of my 5-gallon bucket, but you could use like a pan lid to keep it so the air doesn't hit it, because you want to create anaerobic conditions, meaning without oxygen. So the roundabout way that I'm going to be doing this, and given, I didn't realize this at the time, but the Bokashi bin, or this 5-gallon bucket, isn't the same circumference the entire way. So I think I cut it too short. So what I'm gonna do is, as a barrier, I'm putting this trash bag in it, and then I'm going to use this to compress it down. And I'm compressing it way down because I didn't add that many food scraps. And I figured that this bag might help create a better seal as well. So, and then I don't have it with me right now, but usually you would weigh your weigh your protector down with a few rocks, you know, just to keep it so it's squished and well compacted. But like I said, mine is frozen right now, so it's pretty compacted as is. So what I do is I put some bricks or heavy rocks or something to weigh it down, pop the top on, seal it up, and it's done. It's really that easy. So that's how you do Bokashi.
Thank you, Andie. So as you saw from her video, Bokashi is pretty easy to maintain. You just throw your waste in a bucket, use a mashing tool or a plastic bag to put no oxygen into the system because it needs to be anaerobic without any oxygen. Sprinkle some Bokashi on top of your food and then close the lid. You got to remember to drain out the liquid that comes from the Bokashi every 3 days or a week. You can dilute the Bokashi tea or compost tea in a giant gallon of water, or pour it over your plants. Then you can pour it over your plants as a fertilizer, or you could pour it down the drain to help clean your pipes. Because of the conditions created in Bokashi, it is very acidic, and that is why you can compost a lot of things that you can't do in other systems. However, once the bin is full and you have all of your scraps full, it needs to be buried in something. So this could be buried in a garden. If you don't have a garden, you can use a giant potted plant, or you can add it to your original compost bin or worm bin. With composting and doing vermicomposting, those create useful nutrients and soil that can actually be donated or sold to be used in gardens. Unfortunately, Bokashi isn't like that. You will see your food waste. It will never break down. And you'll also see white mold, which is kind of gross to some people. But as Andie mentioned, you can break down many different food types, a lot of different food types, and it's a very simple way to reuse and compost your food scraps. Now, if you are interested in making any of these bins at home, I will send more detailed instructions after the event with an email. So you'll get all the information to get started, the how-to, the material descriptions, and how to maintain them long-term. But if you wanted to start composting, here's a few things that you can do. First, store your food waste. Andie put hers in the fridge. You could just keep them in a container, fridge, freezer, under the sink. I keep mine in a bucket in the garage. Next, remove the plastic. Make sure that all non-compostable items are removed. This includes fruit stickers, plastic wrap, rubber bands, etc. Then you want to sort your food waste. If you intend on composting it, you may have to take out meat products or keep only vegan items. So take out food waste that cannot be composted. And then always chop or shred everything prior to composting. This makes things break down faster and easier for decomposers to eat. For instance, worms, they have no teeth, so it'll make it easier for them to eat. Now, I know probably some of you guys out there are watching this saying, yeah, I'm not going to compost still. Or you might be like me, who had a family member who didn't want you to compost. But don't worry, there are alternatives to composting that you can do. First, talk to your local university. They have gardens and composters that you may be able to donate. I know Andie mentioned that potentially students at UNLV would be able to donate their food scraps. But as always, check with the university first. Make sure it's okay, and make sure that you're giving them the food waste that is acceptable. For instance, vegan items only. Next is community gardens. There are community gardens all across the state that are already composting, and they would love to take your food waste and add it to their own compost piles. I volunteer at the San Miguel Community Garden once a week, and we compost there. But same thing with the universities. Just make sure to ask them and make sure you're giving them the food waste that they accept. And last but not least, there are other resources available. There is a website called sharewaste.com that will show your neighbors who are composting and what they will accept. There are also regional pickup services that you can use for a fee, of course. Here in Las Vegas, they have Viva La Compost and Las Vegas Livestock. And up in Reno, they have Down to Earth Composting. And last but not least, as we mentioned several times, check your local farmers in your farmers markets and see if they're willing to take your waste to either compost or feed it to their livestock. And if you find any local farmers willing to take your waste, let us know so we can spread the word. But to tie everything together, I'm going to pass it to Aria to talk about a little bit the civics on composting.
Thank you, Torie, and thank you so much for all the information. Today, I've definitely learned a lot about composting during today's event. Believe it or not, composting and civics go hand in hand. You know, if we just look at the very definition of, civic engagement or civic participation, it has a lot of components that tie or are associated with composting. Within just the definition, it says any individual or group activity that's addressing a public concern or that is tied to addressing certain issues. It ties to composting because these are a bunch of issues that are affecting us, not only, as a whole world, as the United States, within our state alone, Nevada. It's helping, reduce the landfill waste. It's helping improve our air quality. And it's also helping, reduce food waste in general. And these issues are a public concern, especially in Nevada, since I know you mentioned it earlier. We have the highest tons of waste per person. And that's a big concern because we need to start letting everyone know and educate everyone on different ways to kind of have that in mind and civically be engaged, whether it's starting in your home or, getting out there and starting by being civically engaged. The second half of civic engagement or civic participation is improving the quality of life within a community through political or non-political process. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions, start these conversations with friends or family. I know you mentioned that maybe you don't have availability or you're not able to compost, but maybe you can spark these conversations up within your university, within your schools, letting family members that maybe do have the space to compost, to let them know, how to compost. But, also looking back and also looking at civic engagement you want to start having these conversations within your group of friends, family members, things like that, but also looking at the bigger scheme of things and the bigger wheel of everything tying together. Within composting and being civically engaged, there's a bunch of things going on during, the legislative session, during these times where a lot of bills and different things that are affecting us need our participation, because at the end of the day, it's a big wheel. And making sure that y'all are going out and voting, that's the biggest thing. Making sure that your voices are being heard in order to make sure to address these issues to your legislators, to your House of Reps, and to everyone around. Maybe, I know during these times of COVID, a lot of people aren't sure if your voter registration is up to date. So the best way to know is, if you've recently moved, maybe you got married and need to update your last name. Maybe you needed to update your party affiliation. These are all different things that if you have, experienced, you might need to update your voter registration. And what we can do is we can go ahead and post in the comment section down below our link to update your voter registration. You can also do it on the Secretary of State's website. Maybe you want to maybe you have any other questions or anything like that, you can always DM us, and we can always make sure to provide any information or any questions of that sort. But that is all I have on my end, Torie. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Aria. And you actually give a really good point. The power of legislation and policies and hearing our voices. Nevada food insecurity and home food waste is still a running problem. So I really hope this workshop gave you the initiatives to help with our future and solve this issue. But one of the issues that here on the climate action team of the League of Conservation Voters we are working on is clean energy in Nevada. The American Jobs Plan, which is a plan that will soon be made into a bill, promises the improvement of Nevada infrastructure and the creation of Nevada clean energy jobs. This is huge. It's the first kind of its to come out. It's the most ambitious climate change plan enacted by any president. And we want to see those things here. Nevada has a C grade in infrastructure. I mean, we've all seen the potholes. We have the potential to be the leaders in solar energy. And a lot of this goes to disrepresented communities, underrepresented communities that need it the most. But without your help, we might not be able to see those possibilities come to our state. So we want to hear your voices heard. So if you have a moment right now, if you could just sign a quick petition showing your support for the American Jobs Plan, that is the start that we can give to hear our voices out, that we want to work towards healthier, cleaner Nevada. So I got that posted right there. The other thing I'm going to post is our link tree, which has all of our events, upcoming events. All next month, we are going to be working on the American Jobs Plan. We're going to be hosting letter writing parties, phone banks. We're going to have featured events with politicians, partner organizations, policy experts. So please check out our link tree and sign up for our upcoming events, all happening in June. Our next one is a phone bank next week. So have your voices heard and get involved with an environmental organization. But before I jump into the information for my other organizations, I wanted to open it up to questions to see if anybody had any questions about the presentation. I think most of them were answered by my wonderful chat, all of my co-hosts. But if anybody has any further questions, you can go ahead and type them out. Or you can unmute yourself and let us know.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, yeah, this is Carrie Stowers calling, and I've been composting now for about 6 months. I have a couple of those expensive ones that you were showing, the ones you flip around. And I started my first one and it kind of got full, so I bought a second one, so I could give my first one time to compost, for it to work. And I bought the worms and I'm putting water in and I'm flipping it and I'm doing all this stuff. But now my second one is starting to get full. I was just wondering, how long does this take? I've been going now for about, I think I started around September, October last year. And there's some soily kind of situations going on, but it's still rather garbagey, not gonna lie.
So, quick question. You said one of these bins was the like traditional composting method, and then one of them was also the worm bin?
They're both the same. They're both just like they're like a barrel that is elevated, and it has a crank on the side, so you just crank it around, and then it has a slidey hole open where you stick the food scraps in.
Okay. See, one thing with these composting methods, from all of the methods I've tried, it does seem that you can see the fastest results with Bokashi. However, we don't really live in a climate that's moist enough to compost mass amounts of compost. And before I was even doing these composting methods, I did have the same struggle that you were having, in which, it's just like it accumulates really fast, and you want to save all these food scraps and you want to compost all the food scraps that you accumulate, but it's hard to do it on a small scale. But it's hard to be avoided. But I guess my solution for that is I just kept getting more and more compost buckets, and that does get out of hand. But unless I'd say that instead of trying to make 1 or 2 compost buckets work, that you should maybe try and find a few more outlets that you can for your food waste, kind of how we said, like reaching out to other community gardens in the valley, or if you have, a garden bed at your house or someplace else that you can go to bury any other compost, because that's another method of compost that I don't think we really touched upon, was like a burying method. But just to have different avenues of places where you can put your compost, or your food scraps. So I'd say keep trying, don't get discouraged. With my vermicomposting bin, it's such a slow process, and it does take time for it to build up and let the process happen. And especially in an environment where it's not very moist and humid and pretty dry and hot, that those aren't really the conditions that are conducive to composting, which is why the indoor composting methods are a little bit better for civilians to do in, a place like this.
And just to touch base on a couple of other things, typically it takes anywhere from about 6 months to a year, and sometimes 2 years, to do a normal composting method. And it's just the same things that Andie listed out. Just takes a long time to break down. But one of the things you could do is just make sure that you chop up your food waste and all of your waste, your yard waste, very well. The smaller it is, the quicker it will break down. And I know that gets a pain when you start having a lot of food waste, but the smallest it could be just makes it break down faster. And then Andie mentioned Bokashi. You can buy the Bokashi brand. You can make it yourself. It's just bran molasses with a little bit of EM1, which is microorganisms. Sprinkle that in your composter, and that will help speed up the process as well. So for all of these methods, if you mix them together, it does kind of speed up the process in general. So you could try that and see if that helps too.
I actually did have one more thing that I wanted to say. I don't know if you've done this before for who asked the question, but what I do before I even put my food scraps in my composting method is I've done batches of like a vegetable broth, and that helps break the vegetables down a little bit better before I even put them into the compost bucket. You know, it's kind of like a first treatment that allows most of the essential kind of nutrients to be pulled out of them, and that so you can, you know, use them in further cooking recipes, and you can freeze the broth. You can even do this with, you know, meat or bones. And, you know, if you were to have a Bokashi method that you did right after making your own broth, that it might help them break down faster too, to speed up the process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions?
Hi, Torie. I just have a quick question. When would you recommend would be like how many days would you recommend in between to take my food waste to a local community garden? Is there like a minimum or a max?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. So, for community garden, I usually wait about 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, I keep my food waste in the freezer just so that it doesn't start molding. But even if your food waste starts to mold or fungus starts to grow in, those are all microorganisms that are going to help break down your food waste later. So 2 weeks max, but I sometimes keep my food waste once a month in a bucket, and then I dump it once a month at the community garden. But typically about 1 to 2 weeks is best. It's nice to get on a regular schedule of doing it every 2 weeks so the food doesn't start getting too rotted by the time you get it there. And I did want to mention a couple of questions from the chat. We had Deborah, who said that she doesn't have enough scraps to compost, but she does have a lot of coffee grounds. We mentioned that coffee grounds are a great thing to compost. They break down pretty quickly, add a lot of nitrogen, but you can also use it as an additive, a fertilizer. You can add it in small amounts to your garden to kind of boost up your plants. And then we had a question about the community fridge locations. I help at a food bank and often have leftover food. That is one of the options. I think somebody posted in the chat all the community fridge locations that you can donate your excess food to as well. It's always a good idea.
And those links that I provided were the profiles or the pages for these community fridges on Instagram. But a number of news outlets have done interviews with people of these community gardens. So if you can't access their profile through Instagram, you could look them up on Google, and I'm sure you could find the addresses of those community fridges.
Looks like we have a question. Do we have any composting laws that might restrict the amount of composting we do at home? Yes, that is a really good question and a really good point. So for these small scale composting, you're allowed to do them within your own house. If you start doing a large compost heap, a big one in your backyard, that technically breaches a law that states that if you have a compost facility, that it will have to have a smell restriction on your house, meaning it might be harder to sell, and people don't want that. So usually large-scale composting is not ideal. However, if you do composting right, it shouldn't smell anyway. And in most of these places, you're only going to be able to do this small-scale composting, especially the indoor composting methods. They won't breach any laws or restrictions. If anybody else has any further questions, we'll have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us, and you will also be forwarding more information at the end of this presentation. But I wanted to give a huge shout out to the community leaders who helped put this together. First is Chispa, Nevada with Aria. If you want to come on and talk about how we can get connected with your organization, I will post your social media links.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Torie. Thank you for allowing us to have the space to be able to talk about being civically engaged and talking about voter registration. And then also talking about composting. I learned a ton, and also I hope I can take that information back to our community and reach out to anybody who might have not been able to tune in today. But if you are interested in checking out Chispa, Nevada, you can always DM us if you have any questions at Chispa, Nevada on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. In regards to voter registration, if you have any questions or are looking to see how you can update your voter registration, just go ahead and let us know, and we are more than happy to help you out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aria. We also had the Southern Nevada group of the Sierra Club joining us. So I'm going to post their website. If you want to check out other events that they're doing with, all of us are environmental organizations. So please connect to one or all of us, get more involved. We also had Millennials in Motion magazine, who is co-hosting this event. They are a local news outlet that provides the information for millennials, so you could check that out as well. And then we have some information from Andie about the garden club at UNLV, Rebels Roots.
Let's see. Yeah, the link that I'll send is for, if you are a UNLV student, is the Rebel Roots Involvement Center page to where you can join the club. However, I am also the UNLV Garden Coordinator this year, so I will be coordinating events that will take place at the UNLV Community Garden, and they will be open to UNLV students, staff, and I have to restrict it because it's UNLV members only. But I love to collaborate on workshops like this.
All right. And just to end it off on a fun note, just so that everyone remembers the information, we're going to end it with some food waste bingo. So in the chat, you're going to see a link. Go ahead and just click on the link and you will generate your own bingo board. Then click on the ones that you get that I call out. And if you get 5 in a row, make sure to shout bingo. All right, let me get this ready for bingo.
Bingo!
Oh, too early. Okay, so once you get your bingo card generated, the first one is anaerobic. Remember that certain systems like anaerobic must not have any air or water added. Next up is proper food storage. This is, ideal to maximize the shelf life of your food. Next is 25% fresh water grows on food waste or grows food waste. So a lot of that water is going to waste. Next is 3-to-1 ratio or more. So we didn't touch base off of this, but you want a good ratio for carbon to nitrogen or paper products, dry products to food waste. So I usually say 3-to-1, but you can use 2-to-1 or 1-to-1, but you usually want more carbon than nitrogen. Next is compost. If your composting system's working well, it'll look like this. Next is brown material. This is going to be your paper, your hay, your straw, wood chips, things of that sort. Anybody close to bingo yet? Let me type in brown material. Next is DIY compost bin. So this is the point of the workshop. Making a compost bin is so much cheaper than buying one. Save you almost $50 or more. And compost bin. Another thing we've been talking about today. Many different types of compost bins out there. Next up is chop up food waste. Remember, all waste should be chopped up. That just speeds down decomposition and makes it for worms to be able to eat it. Next, we have Bokashi bin. This is one of our third composting methods, all about fermenting your food. Nothing yet? All right, let's keep going. Indoor composting. Remember that vermicomposting and Bokashi are considered indoor. They can be out in the heat. Next is portion control. Remember to buy things in bulk that are non-perishable. Buy things fewer if they are not. Next is a China-sized field grows food waste. A large area of the country is used to grow food that will never be eaten. Next is replant. Anytime you have food scraps, Google and see if you can replant them and grow more food, just like you could do with potatoes, spring onions. Next is university composters. Plenty of universities have composters, so make sure to utilize them or see if you can utilize them. Anybody yet? Anybody got bingo? We got a lot of closes, but we'll keep going. Oh, next is community gardens. Another way to donate your food scraps to be composted.
Okay, bingo.
Hey, congrats, Deborah.
I don't know where that, hold on, I gotta find that chart again. Do I have to read them out to you?
I'm sure we can have somebody verify your win, but
Have somebody, because now I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to that page. I don't want to open up hold on here. Full screen, there it is. Okay, do I read them to you?
Sure, go ahead.
Anaerobic or You know how to say it.
Yep.
Compost, community gardens, buy only what you will eat, and indoor composting.
So I think buy only what you eat was not one of the,
Oh, I thought it was like, okay, it was something about eating.
it was proper food storage.
No, there was one about eating.
Let's see. Portion control. Oh, it's portion control.
Oh, so I buy only what you will eat. I assume that was portion control, but that's not. Okay, sorry. Oh, I have it still. Oh, no, I don't, because I got to take the buy only what you will eat out. Never mind. I don't have it. I use that as portion control. Never mind.
No worries. We'll keep on going, and maybe you'll get it with this one, with worm bedding. Kind of looks like the worm bedding that I used in my video. A lot of paper, a lot of soil. Next one is food waste is the third largest producer. Oh, it looks like, Andie, we have bingo.
Do I count?
Yeah, you count.
Here, let Britannia go first.
Oh, Britannia, you got bingo too?
Yeah, I did, but it was after she did, I think.
That's okay. It looks like Emily got bingo too. We could all just be winners. Even Deborah, you could be a winner too.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad.
Thank you guys for participating. Thank you to all the winners. There was no prize. All this was just to help reiterate some of these key points for composting in a fun way. So I hope you enjoyed it. But thank you guys for joining us. Yeah, the prize is knowledge. But thank you guys for joining us for this workshop. This is just a way to start considering your actions to help the environment. And I hope to see you helping us with the environmental action to do even more with the environment. So remember to follow up with the email I'm going to be sending it out. It's going to have more details on composting if you really want to get into it. Remember to be active with us as an environmental organization. Join us for a phone bank shift, write a letter, let these issues be known and express your support. But thank you guys so much. And I'll post.
It was great. It was great. Thank you. Thank you all. It was great.
Yeah,
Thanks, Torie.
You're welcome. And remember to, if you haven't already, sign that petition.
I did already.
Perfect. Oh, and thank you, Lorena, for being our interpreter for tonight. Really appreciated your work.